Hi, my name is Kat, or degree librarian, and welcome to my June wrap-up. June was a month where I read a lot, but I didn't read a lot of great things. Like I had a couple really good ones. I don't really have any ones that I truly hated, I think, but I have a lot that are like, this is a thing I read, I guess. Or just books that were a little disappointing. So yeah, let's get into it. I read 15 books in June, which sounds like a lot. But I had quite a few short ones as well. So it's 3,250 pages total. So that is like 217 pages on average per book. So like it's fine, I guess. It's not a ridiculous amount, I feel, because I have read like a lot of short ones. I've also really binged a comic series. So, you know, that helps getting like the numbers of books up, but but yeah, if you look at the ratings, I had 2.5 star books, which, like, is not the thing that I rate for. I had one book that I gave 3 stars, 3 books I gave 3.5 stars, which like 2.5 to 3.5 is like the range of like, I don't hate it, but I don't love it either. And then like, which one of those it falls on depends on like my overall feelings of the book a little bit more, if like a little more positive than negative, or whatever. So like we had 6 books in that range, plus 1 DNF that like would have fallen in that range if I would have continued. So that is almost half of my rates being in the this was fine category. And then I had 2 4 stars, 2 4.5 stars, and 4 5 stars. So yeah, let's dive in. As usual, I'm gonna start with my DNF and then work my way up from my least favorite book of the month to my most favorite book of the month. So the one book that I DNF'd, I'm a little bit sad about, and that is Sourcery by Terre Pratchett, which is the 4th or 5th Discworld book, the 3rd Wizard book, like sub-series. And I DNF'd at like 10% in. I had tried reading it before in like March or April, and then also I put it down with the intention to pick it back up, because I feel like, this is not the right time for it. So now I did pick it back up, and again, I just did not care. I thought it was boring. I wasn't invested. And then I talked to some Discworld fans, and most of them said, yeah, like just skip that one and move on. With Weird Sisters, so that's what I'm gonna do. I haven't read it yet, but I'm just gonna do that. I do want to give the credit to this book. This was the first time that I noticed just how beautiful Terre Pratchett's prose is. Like I knew it was good, and like I could appreciate it, but like just truly beautiful at times. This was the first time that I really like actively noticed that, so I didn't like that. But yeah, just plot wise and stuff, it couldn't grip me, so I DNF'd. Then the first book that I did finish is A Dark Inheritance by H.F. Askwith. This is a historical fantasy. It's like one of those, like, is it really magic or is there another explanation type of books? And it's like, I read it pretty fast and I was entertained, but so much of this book was just aggressively fine. It was predictable. It you know, it was like there because like heck, it's not too long, like I'll finish it because I'm not hating it, but yeah, I don't know. It's so the premise is that we have our main character who knows he's gonna die in 30 days because his two older brothers have also died on their 18th birthday, and like that's in 30 days his 18th birthday, so he knows that he's gonna die on that day. Or he's convinced of that, like that his family's cursed, whatever. And then his father, who fought in the First World War, is coming back home after many years spent at the sanatorium, but he's like changed and stuff happens with him that I'm not going to spoil, and the scope of it really grows, and like I thought at the beginning that it would be like a small like family drama type thing, which it ended up being like a lot more interesting and like a lot more entertaining than that, so I'm not mad about it, but I just think that it did lack in execution. Like it just felt very bland overall. Also there was like anxiety rep, which was present at the very beginning and the very end, and in between that, like the author seemed to just have forgotten that that was supposed to be in there. So yeah, I don't have a lot to say about this. This is a thing that existed and I read it, I guess. So I gave it 2.5 stars, and it's just not very memorable either. I also gave it 2.5 stars to The Temptation of Gracie by Santa Montefiore. I've been wanting to try this author for a little while, and I thought, you know what, let's just pick up one of her books. That sounds interesting. So this is about this elderly woman called Gracie, and she lives in this town and she never really leaves the town. One day she sees this advertisement for cooking classes in this castle in Tuscany, and so she decides, like, heck, I'm gonna go there and like go on this trip and like follow these cooking classes, whatever. And so her daughter and her granddaughter are coming with her because her daughter is kind of worried about her. And then, you know, like you have the very typical, like, they find that like the thing that they thought were important or maybe not the most important thing, and they come closer together because like the daughter and the mother are sort of, yeah, like the daughter never visits, never calls, and like vice versa. And then you also have like the granddaughter, like, is a teenager, so she and her mother are also constantly fighting, and so like they come together and then they find like the beauty in life and of simple life, because like the mother is a bit of a workaholic, blah 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 blah. And there is also like another timeline in the past where we have Gracie's childhood, because this may not be the first time that she has been there in Tuscany. So like the plot I thought was kind of interesting, like the past timeline plot, I mean by that. You know, I wanted to know what happened, like how we got to the point where we started the book. Generally, I thought that this book is pretty feel good and, you know, very, very like beautiful. I like the acknowledgement that, so like this is like a very big trope in these types of books where you go on to like this different place, which is usually like Italy or the south of France, and then you discover there that like there is so much that like what you thought was important in life is maybe not, and like the things that make you unhappy, like you don't need to stress about them, and life is beautiful there and you're going to be happy there. And I like the acknowledgement in this book that like it is not this place that makes you happy. It is the mindset that you discovered because you are on a location that is not at home. But if you would live here, you would be just as unhappy here as you are at home in England. So like the place itself doesn't do that. Like it's just the fact that you're on vacation and sort of like already like in a different rhythm than you'd be at home. So I did like that. But it's just like the writing of this book wasn't that good. I like the characters were very flat. We had the daughter, like her character arc went from 0 to 100 in less than a day of in-world time. And also just like we saw the character development happen. We don't need a conversation at the end between two side characters about how the main character has changed over the course of a week. Like, we've seen that happen. We were there. So, like, yeah, I didn't like it. Like, it felt, the writing just wasn't very good. And if this were a debut, I would be more lenient and I would say, like, okay, I might try something else by her because she has a huge task list. So like maybe a little bit later when she's a bit more experienced. But this is not at all a debut. Like she read like 20 books before this. So I don't know what happened, but this book really does not make me want to read any more Santa Montefiore. So yeah, I gave it 2.5. It wasn't that good. Like certain elements of it I liked, as I said, and like certain parts made me happy, but just, yeah, the writing really did it for me, I guess. Then I have Tom Lake by Anne Pratchett, which is a contemporary fiction about this woman who was an actress, and she just tells her daughters like the story of her very brief acting career, which largely took place in this theater group at this place called Tom Lake, and you have like a romance and whatever. And I just have no opinions on this book whatsoever. I was like, okay, I don't really fully get the point of this, like what it was trying to do. I did like, because I've been in a play earlier this year, and so that was gone, but like a lot of my time went into that, and so I was like, what am I gonna do? And so I really missed that, and so I did like I liked sort of having like the theater type of vibes and like hearing her talk about how she experienced it. I like that, but I thought it was kind of boring. I was ready for the story to be over long before it was. And like, this is not a long book. So yeah, like, I didn't hate it. I didn't love it. The other book was narrated by Meryl Streep, which is kind of cool, but you know, like, it was okay. If it's your thing, like, maybe you'll like this more than I do. Because this is also a bit outside of my comfort zone, so like, if this is more the thing that you enjoy reading, I can see you really liking it. But for me, it didn't really work fully, but I also didn't dislike it. So I gave it 3 stars, which is like right in the middle of the scale. So yeah. Then I read Danger at Dead Man's Pass by M.J. Leonard and Sam Sedgman, which is the 3rd book in the Adventures on Trains series, which is a series of middle grade mysteries that all take place on trains. And I really, really enjoyed the first 3 installments, book 4, the first 3 installments, but this one just did not work for me, and I think that the setup of it is where there was a disconnect, and like, things were not what I wanted from it. So in the first 3, what happens is our main character Alex goes on a trip with his uncle, taking this like special train in some place, and they stumble into a mystery that Alexandre tries to solve with some other kids that he meets on this train. And I think that setup really works for what the series is, but of course, like, it's not really realistic to just bump into a mystery every time you go on a trip. And I get that they try to like break that formula a little bit and try to mix things up, but I just don't think that the way that it here fully works for me personally. So instead of them stumbling into a mystery, we have someone coming to them, like, due to uncle, basically, like, the uncle then passes the message to say like, hey, I have this case and like, this person has died, but people think it's like sort of more natural cause or like whatever, but I don't believe that, so please come investigate, because I know that you've solved some cases. And so like, they go to this place, they pretend to be part of this really big family, but there's like this estranged cousin, so like the uncle pretends to be that cousin because they don't know, like, they haven't seen him since he was a kid anyway, so like, they don't know what the cousin looks like. So the uncle pretends that it's them, and then that like Alex is his son or something like that, and sort of like go undercover in this family, and it's trying to be a bit like spooky with a like old mansion and maybe things being haunted. And I went to this for like the fun of it, but with this setup, it sort of created a very different tone and a more serious tone, and like, you know, as I said, like a little bit spooky, and like the funness that I was looking for, it I felt wasn't really here in this book. Also, a thing that I really liked about the series is like, it's a middle grade and it hits the balance between adults still acting like adults would in certain situations, while also allowing like the narrative, making sure that these kids have the freedom that they need in order to like go on an adventure and figure out these things and whatever. But I feel like that balance was really weird in here, with certain things that, like, they said yes to one thing and like really clear no to another thing. But I feel like people in general would say yes to like the other thing sooner than the thing that they did allow. And I don't want to spoil things, but I felt like they're what the adults were okay with and what they weren't, I think like didn't fully add up to me. So I felt that that was, yeah, a little inconsistent. Some of the characters were pretty inconsistent, allowing certain things, other things not. Also, like the uncle, especially in here, I found that, like, this problem I really had with him, where he was very consistent with himself in this book and also his character in previous books. And I didn't love that. I think that this book, I would have liked it more if it was just a standalone and not part of the Adventures in Trains series, because like they were barely on a train. They were, most of the time they were just in this mansion, and like trains were mentioned, but they weren't really on a train either. So like you could just take that out and it wouldn't really matter. So I think that this could just be a separate standalone, and I would have liked it more and rated it higher, because my expectations would be different. Because like it's not poorly written or anything, I feel like, or not bad. It's not perfect either, but I don't think it's really bad. But I just, yeah, I had some issues with it. So I gave it 3.5 stars. Then I read a comic that I forgot. I have like a reading journal that I have here for notes, but I just wrote down the Dutch title, which is Land van de Donderdraak, if you care. But I forgot what the... I don't think there's an English version of it, so I usually go with like the original language, the title, but I can't think of it. It'll be in the description. I'll also have the cover on screen with like the original edition. So this book, the second book in the Castan comic series, which is this, it's set in the 17th century in somewhere in Asia, I believe. They say like the exact place, but I forgot. But anyway, there is this fictional kingdom in that region, and our characters, they are part of the French Marine, but they get captured by pirates and then sold as slaves, and through some circumstances they end up in the army of this fictional country, and things go from there. I had fun with the first book. Like, it wasn't perfect, but I enjoyed it. I didn't have like any really big criticisms, but it's like I loved it, 5-star level, so I gave that one 4 stars. This one I felt was like pretty much on a similar level, you know, like there's tension, the plot is interesting, fun, but there's a thing that I have, it is totally a me problem, not the book's fault, but I really struggle with faces. I find it really hard to, you know, like recognize faces, you know, like keep people apart and stuff like that, which is why I struggle with movies sometimes, because if like if like the actors have like some similar features, I just can't tell them apart. I really struggle with that also in real life. So it's a comic series where the style of it has some of the characters that look really similar to one another, and so I was often confused with like, okay, like which one of the two is he talking to right now? That is totally a me problem, but it did really affect my enjoyment, and I was like, so, or like I was really confused with certain heroes, like whose side they were on, because like, wait, weren't they just on like the other side of the conflict, and it turned out to be like two separate characters, but I just thought they were the same one. So that's a thing that has impacted me, and maybe waiting a bit between the first and second book didn't help there. But yeah, I still had fun outside of that. This one starts to be like really more fantasy, versus the previous one was like a fictional country, but other than that, like there wasn't really magic. Here there really starts to be that magic. Yeah, overall, like I casually enjoyed it. I gave it 3.5 stars. But if you don't have the faces thing, like I think if that wasn't the problem, I probably would have also given it a 4. So yeah. Then the last book I gave 3.5 stars is Into the Riverlands by Nghi, which is the 3rd book in the Singing Hills cycle. I really loved the first 2 books. So I was pretty disappointed with this one. This is a series, so we follow Clerk Chi, who goes to different places, and like it's about stories and storytelling and stuff like that. Like each of the books so far has been pretty different from the other ones. I like the first 2 both a lot, but for different reasons, because they're also quite different. The second one is going to be featured later in this video. But yeah, I feel like Into the Riverlands featured like less. It was still like a bit about storytelling, and it still featured some like folk tales and legends and stuff, but not to the extent I feel as the previous ones. And I thought that was a shame. Also, I had some difficulty with keeping the characters apart, because there were like quite a few of them introduced at the same time. And if you only have a novella, like that amount of pages to, you know, tell your story, like you don't have as much time to make each of them feel fully distinct, because each of them just has less page time. So they sort of blended together a bit for me. And just overall my enjoyment was less than the previous one. It's definitely not a bad book. But I was kind of disappointed in this one. So yeah, that's a shame. Gave it 3.5. I hope that book 4 is gonna be a favorite again. But yeah, that is Into the Riverlands. Then I read Crown of Midnight by Sarah J. Maas, which is the second book in the Throne of Glass series. And I quite enjoyed this. Like, the plot really hooked me in this. The scope is starting to get a lot bigger in this one. And like, especially like it's set up for like book 3 to get pretty big. So yeah, I couldn't put it down. It was very page turnery. I also felt like the writing, like Sarah J. Maas made a huge step forward in terms of writing quality in this book, because like book 1 is still pretty clumsy sometimes. Like, I actively noticed sentences and I was like, okay, this is how you chose to construct that sentence. That's a choice. But this one I didn't have that really. So yeah, I enjoyed it. I also started to notice that like Sarah J. Maas's character work is really good. So yeah, I very much enjoyed this one and I give it 4 stars. Then I read The Man Who Died Twice by Richard Osman. Like, I already liked the first book, but I thought that this one was even better. So the series is about this group of elderly people in this retirement village who come together every Thursday to solve some murders. And just like, I love their like friendship and like found family and like the dynamics between them. This was the first book that I understood why people think that the series is funny. The first book, like, I didn't think was very funny. I also didn't see the places where it was supposed to be funny, because, you know, like, sometimes you can see that someone is like trying to make a joke but just doesn't land for you. Like, I just literally didn't even see that. It was like, okay, apparently people think this is funny. I get it with this book. I really chuckled a few times, or like read a few passages to my mom, who also thought they were a lot of fun. So yeah, the characters really shine in this one, especially Joyce. I thought I really enjoyed her in this book. The plot becomes a bit like spy-like, and I've mentioned it with the first book as well. And again here, I think it's really interesting how like the overall book feels very cozy, but like if you think of the case is not one that you'd expect in a cozy book. Like, it's not like the case and the crime gets pretty big in scope. So I think that contrast is pretty interesting. Yeah, I really enjoyed this. I would really like to read the other 2 books in this series. There's going to be more at some point, but Richard Osman is going to be taking a break from the series. So currently there's 4 books, and I really want to continue this. I give it 4.5 stars. Then I read The Tainted Cup by Robert Jackson Bennett. And at the beginning I was struggling with this book a little bit. It's a fantasy mystery, so like I feel like this was marketed as a fantasy with a mystery element to it, but I feel it's more like a mystery book set in a fantasy world. I think the mystery component is a lot stronger than the fantasy component, just in like not in terms of quality, but like just in terms of like how much of the book is one or the other. So we have Din and Anna, and they sort of have this like Watson and Holmes dynamic, and they get call in for a case because someone died because like a tree erupted from their body, and so they try to solve it, and things go from there, and like it gets more, again, the scope gets bigger from there. We get more political, blah blah blah. But this crime of like this one person who died because the tree, and they were like, okay, how did this happen, and how did the person who did this get in, and like and what method did they use and whatever. That part was like, that mystery was solved really quickly, and it just like the pacing was just really killing me at that point. It went so fast, like so fast, and I felt like I was being dragged along with the story, rather than like going on a journey with the characters. That got better at like around halfway point. I don't know if it actually slowed down or if I just got used to it. But the pacing was the thing that I struggled with the most throughout this book, because I really like the characters. I really like the world building. It does a lot with plants. And sort of it made this world feel like a jungle, and I could truly feel like the humidity and like the stickiness and the, you know, like that sort of stuff. I like the heaviness of the atmosphere. I could really feel that, and sort of like how the sun maybe can't really pass through all the leaves of the trees, and so it's a little bit dark as well. And none of that was actually described. But that's just like a very vivid image I had in my head. Also, maybe like the cover also, you know, did part of that as well, to plant that image in the first place. But it was so strong, and I really, really enjoyed that. I liked the mystery itself. I thought that was really fun and interesting to see how everything was done. There was a lot of politics and like political intrigue that I thought were really cool. This book wraps up pretty nicely. Like, it can work as a standalone, but it definitely leaves the door open for like more bigger and grander schemes in the future and in further books. So yeah, I really enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars at the time that I finished it, but it really sticks with me, and the more time goes over it, the more and more and more I like it. I'm not going to change my ratings because I don't do that, but yeah, it's just like it really sticks with me, and I feel like it's pretty unique in a lot of ways. So yeah, I really enjoyed this. I definitely recommend. I couldn't put this down. It just read it so fast. So yeah, The Tainted Cup. Then I have When the Tiger Came Down the Mountain by Nevo. This is the second book in the Singing Hill cycles. I already hinted before that this was going to be here. And I was so excited to read this book because I loved The Empress Sultan's Fortune so much. And as I already mentioned, like, this book is quite different from that first book, and I was like disappointed about that for 1 second. But then there were other elements of it that I really liked, and that even if the thing that I loved so much about book 1 is gone, because like, book 1, I get the story of this empress, but it's very fragmented, and you get like little bits and pieces, because the way it's formatted is that they find this object, and then you get the story of like that object and how it is relevant for the overall thing. So you may not get everything in chronological order. There are big gaps, and so it sort of becomes a puzzle where you get to fill in the blanks and you have to piece everything together. That wasn't really the case in here. Here you had more the story of this mythical figure where humans and tigers, which is not like normal tigers, but like shapeshifters that can change into tigers, where they have a very different version of the story. And so Clerk Chi is sort of comparing their version with the tiger princess's version, and sort of get that back and forth. And I really enjoyed that. And so we had this very interesting idea of like, yeah, who do we believe? Is like any of the two stories really the right one, or is the truth somewhere in the middle? So yeah, I really liked it. Here I definitely found the story within a story a lot more interesting than the frame story, personally. But yeah, I like it a lot. I highly recommend the Singing Hill Cycle, even if I already mentioned that book 3 was a little disappointing to me. But the first 2 books are great. So yeah. And then we have the final 4 books that I'm gonna sort of mention together because I read volumes 3 through 6 of Castle in the Stars by Alex Ellis, which I enjoyed a lot. I think I gave all of them 5 stars except volume 4. That one I gave 4.5 stars. So this story is told in different arcs. There are 6 volumes out currently. I think 4 of them are translated into English at this point. But like the first 2 are like about sort of starting this space travel and figuring out the space travel, and the start of the exploration of the universe, where we just go to the moon and that's it. And then we have volumes 3 and 4, which a lot of countries have sort of caught up with the technology to do space travel, and they're exploring. And our main characters go to Mars in this, and we get stuff at Mars. So the third one really thematically deals with like science for the sake of science and for the knowing of things and discovering things, versus using science in order to gain power, and how people will always use like science and technology for their own personal gain and their own political gain. And even there is like this conference where all the scientists agree that like the substance that they discover that makes space travel very easy and very cheap and very whatever should be an apolitical thing and cannot be used on a political thing. And even that conference gets boycotted, which is a light term if you know what happens, but I'm not going to spoil it, by certain political forces. And so I thought that was very interesting, how like everyone uses this science for their own gain. And we see that further explored in then volume 4, where they're really are at Mars, because like a big part of Volume 3 is still set on Earth with like the intention of going to Mars, and like they go to Mars in the end, but there's not much there yet. Like Volume 4 is like where we really get to see civilization that already exists on Mars and how that works. I think like the world building on Mars is really funny. Like it's like this desert planet, but a lot of the creatures that live there is like what we would think of as sea creatures, so like fish type beings, but like just like floating through the sky because it's a desert. And just I thought it was really funny how Mars worked. So yeah, it's this one is very much like about colonization, because when humans reach Mars, they like colonize the civilization that already exists there, and you know, it's very reminiscent of our actual history. But it also really deals with growing up and how what it means to grow up and what it doesn't necessarily mean to grow up. So we have like a lot of adults telling our main characters, who are like kids, teenagers, that they should just stop this like childish, idealistic ideas, and that they should just accept that this is how the world is, that people who have power will always seek more and will use that power for their own gain. And our main character is just refusing to accept that, and he's like you know how growing up doesn't mean that you have to let go of your morals, which I often find is a thing that we sort of we mix up sometimes, where we think that just growing up and learning how the world works means that you just have to accept it and that you can't really try to change it anymore, which is of course not true. You know, like to quote the live action Cinderella, just because it's how it's done doesn't mean that's how it ought to be done. So yeah, I really like that. The pacing in Volume 4 felt just a little bit rushed. Also, I feel like Book 1 really felt like sort of an ending where there's still a lot of loose threads that we're trying to figure out, but it truly felt like the end of an arc. This one a lot less so. So I dove into Volume 5 pretty quickly, and I thought that would be the final arc, book Volume 5 and 6, and just based on some of the setup, I thought they would go to Venus in that one, but that's not the case. Maybe I should looked at the title, because it literally said I would go to Paris. So this book is mostly set on Earth, with our characters trying to undo the harm that they've done on Mars, or like the harm that has been done using the technology that they've developed. So the 5th volume is like told kind of non-linearly, which like really gets like this intrigue and this mystery thing in. Volume 6 is told linearly again. So this is the only one so far that we have that. We sort of jump back and forward in timelines, and so you have this mystery of how do we get to where we are. We see even more of the colonialism here. We also see our main character having to come to terms with his father maybe not choosing the same side as he does, and sort of working with the colonizers and the people who do harm, and just, yeah, again, this theme of like how these kids don't get help because a lot of people just accept that this is how the world is, and this is how it's always been and how it's always going to be, and they just refuse to even consider the fact that, you know, things could change, and that if they have the power to change things but they don't, that makes them just as guilty as the people who are doing these things. So yeah, I really liked that one. And then volume 6, which I thought was going to be the final one, but apparently not, because the ending of this book is not the ending to a series. But there is no like announcement or like no news on a 7th one coming out. So that's why before reading this, I assumed that it would be the last one. But at the end of the book, we leave Earth, and we say like that they're going to Venus for reasons that I'm not going to spoil. And so, but currently there's like a spin-off series that is being released that is set on Venus a few years before volume 6 is set. So I assume that the spin-off series, they're gonna fully release that, and then our main characters are gonna arrive at Venus in Castle in the Stars volume 7, and they're gonna meet the characters from that spin-off series, and sort of it can become relevant. So that's why he releases that one first before he continues writing this. I assume that that is going to be the case. I don't know that, but that is just, I think that that is, with the information that I have, that seems like the most logical solution. But yeah, I thought it was great. We had a bit of a heist plot. We're still trying to liberate these colonized species. It's called the Interplanetary Exposition, or something of that sort. And sort of we have this like exposition where you have like different things that are being shown from different planets, and so like they're like dinosaurs on Venus, which I think is really funny. So yeah, I really enjoyed this. The plot is like very tense, and I was really in it. And so yeah, but now I really want to see how it continues. But yeah, I'm gonna have to wait a while for book 7, which is really sad. But yeah, if you haven't read A Castle in the Stars and you want a alternative history, that is basically like, what if humans reached the moon 100 years earlier than they did? That the illustrations give off Studio Ghibli vibes. Read this. It's great. It is fantastic. I really love it. I'm kind of obsessed by it. So yeah, that was my wrap up for the month. If you've read any of these books and you have thoughts you want to share, feel free to do so. Also, please share your favorite book that you've read in June, and I hope that I will see you again in another video. Bye!